Welcome back to ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. This is Energy 808, the cutting edge. Today we're going to talk about the state of solar and the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standards in Hawaii. Quote, 2 steps forward and 1 step sideways. With our special co-host and guest, Marco Mangelsdorf. So since the 1970s, Hawaii has had significant incentives to encourage and support the development and adoption of renewable energy to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Today, we're going to check to see how well we've done. Welcome to the show, Marco. Nice to see you.
Aloha Francia. Thanks so much for having me back on.
Well, you studied this for a long time. Give us the dynamic of how it's worked.
Yes, I've been fortunate to kind of have been both a scholar of Hawaii energy going back to the late 1970s. Attended one of my very first solar conferences, in fact, the Sheraton in Honolulu back in 1981. And since 2000, I've been very active directly in the solar PV scene here, mostly on the Big Island, but also across the state. And what I like to do kind of at the beginning of each new year is take stock on where we are, what kind of progress has been made, what kind of obstacles remain, challenges, and so forth, and just kind of get a snapshot in time of how we should feel, about our quest to become more energy independent, more self-reliant, and therefore more secure as this beautiful island chain in the middle of the big blue Pacific. So
this is particularly relevant when we have climate change breathing down our back, and we have the possibility of extreme weather and other effects of climate change that could put a lot of stress on our power systems and grid.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, there are, of course, planners, both private and public, who look at supply disruption scenarios, right? For both fuel coming to the state, for foodstuffs coming to the state, for, everything that makes life possible here in this one of the more isolated parts on this beautiful planet of ours. So, I've chosen to contribute in my Manini way on the solar PV front. And if maybe we can pull up that first graphic there. So I decided to take a look earlier this year at the PV permit numbers, which to me are an important barometer of progress being made. And I've been tracking these numbers since 2012 across the state, which includes the 4 counties of the state. And just a little bit of historical background. In 2015, the state's net energy metering fantastically successful program ended in October. Actually, it was ordered to end in October. It took a while for it to kind of peter down. But you can see in the numbers there that was the beginning of some very, very lean years in PV across the state, according to permit numbers. 2016, 2017, 2018 were very difficult, challenging for a lot of us. There was a great winnowing of the field, and of course, a very far cry from the peak year that we saw collectively in 2012, where we had over 20,000. But fortunately, as things would have it, there has been an increase, as you can see in the right part of the graph. And last year, 2022, we got the best numbers that we had since 2014. So I'm almost kind of given up predicting the trajectory, the ups and downs of the solar coaster, but I'd much rather see this type of upward ramp than the other way around. So, and I'll just
what exactly caused that dip there in 2016, 2017, 2018? And you've told me that you actually supported the end of MEM, and MEM had a lot to do with the dip. Was there a bright side to that? Was there anything good about the reduction of those numbers in those years?
Well, I mean, it wasn't good from the perspective of my business and a lot of solar businesses, virtually every solar business. But I mean, I'm a believer that incentives, especially those that are essentially feeding at the public trough, are not designed to be forever, and that it is an important thing to do is to ramp things down, as was decided, ramp things down when solar PV became much more affordable, much more mainstream, much more cost effective. So, does something good come out of it? Well, it's just kind of, it's an overall move towards kind of levelizing the playing field, the energy playing field. And as we've talked about many times over the years, the energy playing field across the planet, there's so much at stake, so many huge players, billions, trillions of dollars in play, that it's heavily subsidized. It's heavily subsidized in the U.S. and virtually in every globe, every corner of the globe. So I was willing, and I still am willing, to see some incentives for solar going down to better reflect market conditions and also, reduce the feeding of the public trough. So why did
that chart that you showed us begins with 21,000 installations? Can we see that chart again? It begins at 21,000 installations in the year 2012. And now you say, we're back up to 9,000 and change, going on 10,000. But that's let's see, that's not quite as good as 2014, and it's really only half of 2012. Wouldn't it be better if we could get to 21,000 again? And if so, how can we do that?
Would it be better? Of course it would, Jay. Of course it would. Not just because my company would have a piece of that action, but it would indicate that there is an acceleration of adoption for rooftop solar, both for a business, commercial, industrial, and residential. Now, the prospects of that happening, I believe, are rather small. Why? Because, for one thing, if you look at picture a bell curve in terms of people adopting any particular product, and I think we were at the top of that bell curve in 2012, which is indicative of the numbers, and we're on the tail end, the other side of the bell curve, which means that there's less of a total market that is willing to go solar electric. In other words, the low-hanging mangoes, the juicy mangoes and lilikoi and all sorts of other wonderful fruit have, I think, largely been picked over. So, yeah, but on the positive side, and here are a couple of numbers for you. So last time I looked, there are about somewhere under 500,000 Hawaiian Electric customers across all 5 of their islands. So somewhere under 500,000. And by my last count, it's somewhere around 100,000 of those 500,000 have a solar PV system. And by my math, 20%, right? So the other side of 20% is 80% or so do not. So that still represents quite a market. And, to their credit, Hawaiian Electric has stated repeatedly over the years that they want to see, they anticipate seeing, they support seeing continued significant increase in rooftop solar. So I believe that will be the case, but in terms of hitting 20,000 or so PV permits a month, or that would be something, 20 plus thousand permits a year, I'm doubtful of that. But, I'd love to be proved wrong. So why did we have the best year last year in the past 8 years? Well, the next slide will give us an indication of one of the reasons behind that. And as you can see there, the top line is the cost of electricity, kilowatt hour in Hawaii. And the bottom line is the US price. And of course, there's quite the delta. And anybody who pays a utility bill in Hawaii knows that. So, for example, here on this island, the Helco residential rate hit 50 plus cents a kilowatt hour last year. In other words, $0.50 for a kilowatt hour. Why was that? Well, because the price of oil shot up. So when people compare solar to utility, and they're paying an increasing amount to the utility company, which the utility company has no control over what it pays for oil, then that makes for a better comparison between continuing to pay the utility company versus putting a solar electric system in, which provides a hedge against the increase of kilowatt hour pricing. So that, I believe, was a significant reason for the PV permits to go up last year as well.
If you look at this chart, we don't see a line representing the cost of renewables, of solar. Where would that line be if there was such a line on this chart? Would it be in the middle, between the blue line and the black line, between the U.S. price and the Hawaii price of, generated electricity from the utility? Is it cheaper to have solar than the black line? Is it more expensive?
So I do not have those exact numbers at my fingertips, but I can tell you, I'm going to go with numbers I do have in my head, which is, for example, the power purchase agreement pricing for utility scale solar and storage across the state of Hawaii has been coming in these past several years at somewhere 10 cents and under per kilowatt hour, 10 cents and under. So on the mainland, solar plus storage is half of that, or can be half of that. So maybe 4 cents, 5 cents a kilowatt hour for a long-term power purchase agreement between the developer, the owner of the asset, and the utility company. So, which is one of the reasons why there's been a lot of support, not across the board, a lot of political support, at least from the Democrats and also from some Republicans, to accelerate the development of renewable, because the trend line for renewables has been going down, and as well as storage, whereas the trend line has been going up for fossil fuels, oil. And since it is a finite resource, I mean, it stands to reason, whereas we may not have hit, quote, peak oil yet, that sooner or later, and I think sooner rather than later, we will hit a peak oil production globally. And then as that commodity reduces in volume, it's inevitable, in my view, that the price of that commodity will trend up.
So if I were going to draw that line, the solar line on that chart we were just looking at, it would be between the two, between the black line and the blue line.
Well, actually, I see, it's kind of hard to see on the screen here. Let me just look. Like I said, some on the mainland are showing, at 5 cents or less a kilowatt hour. So it'd actually be significantly under the blue line of the U.S.
Under the
price.
blue line. Oh, that's very interesting. Under the blue line.
Yeah.
So solar means a lot. We have the sun, we have the sun, we have the right resources to make solar really work. That's so interesting to hear that. Okay. I just wanted to mention one thing. Everybody downtown has a landlord, right? And every year, the landlord pays for electrical energy to run the building. At the end of the year, there's usually under the lease, there's a reconciliation where the landlord tells you whether he paid less or more than the prior year. And if it's more, you get a bill. And that's what's happening. Tenants who, are actually not too excited about downtown anyway these days because of COVID, all the fallout of COVID, they're getting bills for increases in the cost of electricity from the utility for last year. And I find that very interesting, that a metric that applies to every business, at least in the downtown area, probably everywhere, is that energy costs are going up.
And what you're referring to, I believe, Jay, is called a true up. It's a true up based on the previous, in this case, 12 months worth of data. So, yeah, fortunately for all of us Hawaii ratepayers, the cost of oil has gone down some and stabilized. So we're no longer at that peak on this island of 50 plus cents a kilowatt hour, but we're still in the 40s. So let's go to the next slide if we could, please. Because I wanted to take a look at, what was our generation portfolio like last year in the state of Hawaii? And this is courtesy of the U.S. Energy Administration or Energy Information Administration, part of, I believe, the Department of Energy in Washington. And I again find it striking, alarming, disturbing, dismaying, all of those D words, that despite the progress we've made since the 1970s with all these incentives, tax credits, net energy metering, that we are still, and this is total electricity generation for the entire state, we are still dependent upon oil coming from great distances for 60% of our generation, 60%. And that's a good segue to another data point that I wanted to share with you that also kind of puts my hair up on end, which is, I'm going to follow me here. So 1960, the state's energy consumption came 99.7% from petroleum. It's pretty darn close to 100% back in 1960. Fast forward to 33 years later, 1993, we got down to 84% of the state's total energy consumption was coming from oil. So 1993, now we're to 2023. So 30 years later in 2023, we are, drum roll, we are 80%, still 80% dependent upon imported petroleum products for our entire economy. 4/5 of the state's energy appetite is fed by oil. So
it says petroleum 60%. You're saying it's
my friend,
80%?
that's electricity generation. That's only electricity generation. I'm talking about now, I'm switching up things a little bit on you. I'm talking about total energy consumption for the state, which includes electricity generation, transportation, and everything else.
All islands.
The whole chain. So we're still 4/5 of our energy consumption that allows us to live the life that we lead comes from imported oil.
Why?
Well, transportation, is we've talked about, many others have talked about, remains a very difficult nut to crack, because the percentage of total vehicles on the road in Hawaii still less than 5% of electric vehicles. And that number is going to go up. Of course, it will go up, but it's going to go up slowly as opposed to exponentially, in my view. So oil is so versatile as a liquid fuel that we've become addicted as a planet to this very useful, magical, when it was discovered in quotation marks. I think it was the 1860s at someplace in Pennsylvania. And that was, turned into quite the revolution, right? I asked myself, what more can we do? Because obviously we need to do more, but whatever it is that we're doing, Jay, it is insufficient. It is absolutely insufficient to get us where we need to go. So maybe this is a good time to move to the next slide. So another thing I like to look at are the so-called renewable portfolio standards, which is looking at the percentage of renewable in the generation numbers of the utilities, electric utilities in the state. And as you can see there, I list Oahu, Hiko, Miko on Maui County, Helco for the county of Hawaii, and then KIUC is kind of a reference point. And these numbers represent the old methodology to crunch the numbers that has been superseded by the new legislative mandated methodology, which just goes into effect essentially now. So you see there those numbers: Oahu 34 and something percent, Maui 45, Big Island 60.4, and then KIUC, according to 2021 numbers, which was reported by them last year, at 69.5%. So just kind of remember those numbers, and let's move to the next slide. So this I just got from my friend Jim Kelly at Hawaiian Electric earlier today. There was a press release by Hawaiian Electric last Friday where they announced what the RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard, what the numbers look like after changing the methodology mandated by the ledge and signed by David Ige into law. So you'll notice there in the blue bars are the old methodology numbers, and the yellow bar are the new methodology numbers. So what changed? What changed? What changed is that the old methodology used as the denominator the total kilowatt hour sales, with the numerator being what was consumed as far as renewable energy at the source or at the end use. So what changed is the methodology went from the denominator being sales to generation. And you always are going to have a higher generation figure than you're going to have sales, because you're always going to be generating more than people need, because that's the nature of utilities keeping the lights on. You cannot have it completely balanced where generation and consumption are right there. So I was kind of struck by these numbers, and you can see, I mean, the numbers took quite a hit. So last year calculated the old methodology, Hawaiian Electric consolidated was around 39%. The new numbers, you can see, this is the far left of the graph, was 32%. 32%. The Big Island especially, well, last year, old methodology, 60%, sounds pretty impressive. Well, we dropped down to less than 50%. So what does this mean? Well, I mean, the reality didn't change, but the way of measuring the reality changed. And, you know, the legislature did this for a reason, I would like to think, to give a more accurate portrayal, accurate indication of really the progress that we're making. But there's no denying that the numbers went in the other direction. As far as we thought we were at X, in terms that we're at X minus something. So if you look at Hawaiian Electric consolidated, 32%, we still got a long ways to go, And it just adds more fuel to my fire and kind of alarm that we're not in a particularly good place. I mean, that's not to diss anybody, any company. We just need to point the finger back at us and saying we are not doing enough. We're not doing it fast enough. We have to have a greater sense of urgency because we're living in a delusional bubble, really, given how the supply lines are so fragile, in my opinion.
Marco, why are the different islands, different counties so spread apart like that? What is the reason for that difference?
You know, we first look at Oahu, and one of the challenges on Oahu is that they're much more land constrained. You guys on Oahu are much more land constrained as far as multi-megawatts worth of solar PV farms. So that's one of the reasons why Oahu, and plus the population, of course, is so much greater on Oahu. Compare that to the Big Island, where we have a lot less population, 200,000 versus 1 million on Oahu. And we also happen to have a geothermal resource, which has come back after the 2018 disruption big time to PGV almost being overrun by flowing lava. Oahu is a more difficult nut to crack just because of the land issues, because of the size of the population there. I think those are two major reasons.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind is they have NIMBY because of the lack of land, and people don't want it in their backyard.
Yeah.
So it's hard for the utility to actually make these installations when everybody is so self-interested.
So this is a table showing, according to the old methodology, showing the RPS over a 10-year period from 2013 to 2022. So goes from 18.2% in 2013 to 39.1. So just kind of keep that as the range, 18 to 39. So let's go to the next slide, please. And this is the new methodology. So if you go from 2013 to 2022, it goes from 17 to 32%. So again, it's just graphically demonstrates that with the new methodology, Again, the reality didn't change in terms of actual PV or wind or geothermal or biomass being produced, but the way we counted it has changed. So again, I just find that interesting. Methodologies are fun to play with, I guess, and they did what they did. So let me kind of do a quick tour of the island. So Kauai, the Garden Isle, they have received PUC approval to continue down the path of the West Kauai Energy Project, WKEP, which would be pumped hydro. And they had received a FONSI, I was trying to remember that acronym so I could spit it out, a finding of no significant impact. There we go. Finding of no significant impact if this program were to go through. So it is, I'd like to believe it's full speed ahead. That said, Isaac Moriwaki and Earth Justice have filed suit to stop it. So that, yet again, the courts are going to be involved as to whether a renewable energy project in the state will come to fruition or not. If it does, after the first full year of operation, it is estimated by some that could bring KIUC to the 90% range as far as renewables. So that's a hopeful thing, and I do support that project. On Oahu,
What's the reason for the lawsuit? Some environmental consideration?
well, yes, of course. I mean, anytime you mess with water in the state of Hawaii, Jay, watch out. So I don't want to oversimplify things, and
It's too bad because what you have is competing environmental concerns. And the one argument is on environmental concerns, and the other argument is on environmental concerns. And
yes,
gee, I'd like to see that resolved quickly.
but what provides the greater good for the greater number of people? I mean, easy thing to pose, right? Very easy question to pose, but much more difficult to answer. So to continue across the island chain, on all the islands, there are projects and requests for proposals, kind of round 3, that Hawaiian Electric is doing for many, many, many more megawatts of renewable generation with storage, including firm generation. So, the prospects are positive for a lot more. And unfortunately, these things take a very long time. So, for example, here on the Big Island, there's round 3 of RFPs that have been in play, and the current deadline has been pushed out for proposals until April of this year. And that's for, if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be for 65 megawatts. So just an idea of scale here. Peak generation on this island from HELCO is somewhere around 180 to 190 megawatts. So 65 additional megawatts of solar or storage, for example, is not chump change by any means. And once the proposals come in, there will, of course, be vetting of the proposals. They will choose winners, essentially, negotiate PPAs, have it be reviewed and analyzed by the PUC. All this takes time. So a round 3 RFP of, let's say, 65 megawatts that would conclude, we hope, this year, and we're only at the beginning of 2023, I'm going to estimate would not come online until 25, 26. That's just the way things work around here. And it's not just in the state of Hawaii where there can be delays. I mean, this is nationwide. I've been tracking this stuff as well. There's supply issues, there's permitting issues, there's interconnect issues, there are issues. So it's not unique to Hawaii. But nonetheless, these are hopeful signs of our utility companies that are pursuing more renewables, cost-effective renewables. So that's hopeful, and we gotta stay the course and not be distracted.
Okay, and I would add to that yes, there are certain delays that are built into a free society, into our democracy, into our governmental process, but there are also things that that can be fixed in terms of that bureaucracy. And I think we have to work hard on making sure that anything that can be speeded up is speeded up. Otherwise, we won't make it. We won't make it, and we don't know the results if we run into a problem in terms of fossil fuel supply or extreme weather. And we really, time is of the essence. Don't you agree?
To be a bit repetitive here, I just continue to go back to this 80% number. 80% of the state's economy is fueled by oil. I mean, we've been going at this now in terms of incentives since I think the first Hawaii state tax credit was 1976-ish. So that's 24 years from 76 to 2000, another 23 years to now. So by my math, that's 47 years, close to 50 years of incentives, which I'm very grateful for. But it's clearly not enough. It's not enough to move us at the pace that we need to move.
Okay, Marco Mangelsdorf. We're talking about the state of solar and the RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standards, here on Energy 808, The Cutting Edge. Thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you, my friend. Always
Aloha.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.